This is Politics Point News Channel, so your source for the latest developments in U.S. politics, bringing you breaking news, real-time updates, and in-depth analysis from Washington to the world. You're watching Politics Point. Donald Trump stands at one of the most extraordinary intersections of American political and legal history. Never before has a former president faced such an avalanche of criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and constitutional questions, while simultaneously mounting a campaign to return to the highest office in the land. The sheer scope of his legal entanglements reads like something out of a political thriller, yet it's all unfolding in real time, reshaping the American political landscape in ways we're only beginning to understand. To grasp the magnitude of what we're witnessing, we need to understand that Trump isn't dealing with one or two legal issues. He's facing 91 criminal charges across 4 separate indictments, multiple civil cases that have already cost him hundreds of millions of dollars, and ongoing investigations that continue to evolve. Each case carries its own weight, its own potential consequences, and its own political implications. Together, they form a legal storm unlike anything America has ever seen surrounding a major political figure. Let's start with what many legal scholars consider the most serious charges, the federal case regarding classified documents. In June 2023, Trump was indicted on 37 counts related to his handling of classified materials after leaving the White House. The indictment alleges that Trump retained hundreds of classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, including some marked as top secret and relating to nuclear weapons, military vulnerabilities, and intelligence gathering methods. But the charges go beyond mere retention. Prosecutors allege Trump obstructed justice by hiding documents from his own attorneys, suggesting they lie to federal investigators, and even having security footage deleted to conceal the movement of boxes containing classified materials. The political consequences of this case are profound and multifaceted. For Trump supporters, the prosecution represents what they see as a weaponization of the justice system against a political opponent. They point to questions about how President Biden and former Vice President Pence handled their own classified documents, arguing there's a double standard at play. Trump himself has amplified this message relentlessly, using the indictment as proof of what he calls a witch hunt orchestrated by the deep state to prevent his return to power. Remarkably, this narrative has resonated with his base. Polling data from mid-2023 showed that Trump's support among Republican primary voters actually increased after the classified documents indictment, suggesting that for many conservatives, these legal troubles have become a badge of honor, evidence that Trump is such a threat to the establishment that they'll stop at nothing to bring him down. But the political calculus extends far beyond the Republican base. General election polling tells a different story. While Trump's core supporters rally to his defense, independent voters and moderates express significant concern about a presidential candidate facing such serious charges. The specter of a potential commander-in-chief who allegedly mishandled the nation's most sensitive secrets creates unease among voters who prioritize national security. This tension between energizing the base and alienating the middle has become one of the defining dynamics of Trump's third presidential campaign. Then there's the Georgia case, which in many ways represents an even more direct challenge to American democracy itself. In August 2023, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis secured a sweeping indictment against Trump and 18 co-defendants, charging them with racketeering and conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. The indictment reads like a sprawling conspiracy narrative, detailing an alleged months-long effort to pressure state officials, create slates of fake electors, and breach voting systems in Coffee County. The case includes the infamous phone call where Trump asked Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find exactly enough votes to overturn Biden's victory in the state. The Georgia case carries unique political weight because it centers on the core question of the 2020 election and Trump's attempts to remain in power despite losing. For those who believe the election was stolen, Trump was simply fighting for what was rightfully his, using every legal avenue available. For those who accept that Biden won fairly, Trump was attempting to subvert American democracy itself, making this perhaps the gravest abuse of presidential power in modern history. There's very little middle ground, and that polarization has seeped into every corner of American political life. What makes Georgia particularly interesting from a political standpoint is that it's a state-level prosecution, which means a presidential pardon cannot touch it. If Trump were to win the presidency in 2024, he could potentially make the federal cases against him disappear, but Georgia would remain. This has created a strategic dilemma for Trump and raised profound questions about what happens if a sitting president is convicted by a state court. Could Georgia authorities actually imprison a sitting president? Would the Secret Service have to guard him in a state penitentiary? These aren't just legal hypotheticals anymore. They're scenarios that political strategists and constitutional scholars are genuinely grappling with. The federal January 6th case adds yet another layer to this complex tapestry. Special counsel Jack Smith charged Trump with conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. This indictment focuses on Trump's broader efforts to overturn the 2020 election, including his pressure campaign on state officials, his attempt to leverage the Justice Department to validate false claims of fraud, his pressure on Vice President Mike Pence to reject electoral votes, and ultimately his role in the events of January 6th itself. The political consequences of this case strike at the heart of American governance. The indictment essentially accuses a former president of attempting to overturn a democratic election through fraud and intimidation. For Trump's opponents, this validates everything they've been saying since January 6th about Trump's threat to democracy. For his supporters, it's another example of the establishment criminalizing political activity and trying to prevent voters from having their say. Trump has masterfully framed himself as the victim in all of this, arguing that he was simply exercising his First Amendment right to question an election he genuinely believed was fraudulent. This raises uncomfortable questions that go beyond Trump himself. Where is the line between vigorous political advocacy and criminal conspiracy? Can a president be prosecuted for actions taken while in office that he believed were constitutional? The answers to these questions will shape American politics for generations, regardless of what happens to Trump personally. But we can't discuss Trump's legal battles without addressing the New York cases, particularly the hush money prosecution that made history in May 2024 when Trump became the first former president ever convicted of felony crimes. A Manhattan jury found him guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records related to payments made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during the 2016 campaign. The prosecution argued that Trump disguised hush money payments as legal expenses to hide damaging information from voters, turning what might have been misdemeanors into felonies by alleging the false records were created to commit or conceal other crimes. The political fallout from this conviction has been fascinating to watch unfold. Initially, many pundits predicted it would devastate Trump's campaign. After all, he was now a convicted felon, but the reality has proven more complicated. Trump and his allies immediately attacked the trial as rigged, pointing to the fact that it took place in heavily Democratic Manhattan before a judge who had made small donations to Democratic causes. They portrayed the prosecution as purely political, an attempt by Democrats in a blue city to interfere with the presidential election. Once again, many Republican voters rallied to Trump's defense, with some polls showing his support actually strengthening after the conviction. Yet the conviction has undeniably created problems for Trump in the broader electorate. Focus groups of swing voters expressed deep discomfort with the idea of voting for a convicted felon, even if they questioned the prosecution's motives. The conviction has given Democrats concrete talking points and has been featured prominently in opposition advertising. It's provided a simple, powerful message: Donald Trump is a convicted criminal. No amount of political spin can erase that basic fact from the historical record. The civil cases add yet another dimension to Trump's legal woes and their political implications. In February 2024, a New York judge ordered Trump to pay over $350 million in penalties after finding him liable for fraudulently inflating his net worth to obtain better terms from lenders and insurers. Trump has appealed, but the case has done significant damage to his carefully cultivated image as a brilliant businessman. For decades, Trump's brand has been built on the idea that he's a deal-making genius who turned $1 million loan into a multi-billion-dollar empire. The fraud ruling directly contradicts that narrative, with a judge essentially finding that much of Trump's supposed wealth was built on lies. Then there are the E. Jean Carroll defamation cases, which resulted in judgments totaling over $88 million. These cases carry particular political weight because they involve allegations of sexual assault. Carroll, a former magazine columnist, accused Trump of raping her in a department store dressing room in the 1990s. While Trump was not found liable for rape in the legal sense, the jury did find him liable for sexual abuse and defamation. For many voters, particularly women and younger Americans, these verdicts reinforce their view of Trump as someone who treats women with contempt and believes he's above accountability. The cumulative financial impact of these civil judgments is staggering. Trump is looking at potential liabilities exceeding $500 million. While he's appealing and has posted bonds to delay payment, the cases have raised serious questions about his actual financial situation. For someone who has always sold himself as incredibly wealthy, the scramble to come up with appeal bonds has been politically embarrassing. His campaign and legal teams have merged in many ways, with campaign donations increasingly going to legal fees rather than traditional campaign activities. This has created a perverse incentive structure where Trump benefits financially from legal troubles that generate outrage and donations from his supporters. But perhaps the most significant political consequence of Trump's legal battles is how they've reshaped the Republican Party itself. The party has essentially rallied around Trump in the face of his indictments, with very few prominent Republicans willing to say that someone facing 91 criminal charges should not be president. Instead, we've seen the opposite, a competition among Trump's former rivals for who can defend him most vigorously. This represents a remarkable shift in American political norms. There was a time when criminal indictment would be disqualifying for a presidential candidate. Now, for many Republicans, it's become proof of Trump's commitment to fighting the establishment. This dynamic has created a litmus test within the GOP. Any Republican who suggests Trump's legal troubles are legitimate concerns is immediately branded as a rhino, a Republican in name only, and faces potential primary challenges from Trump-endorsed candidates. The few Republicans who have maintained critical stances toward Trump, like former Representative Liz Cheney or former Governor Chris Christie, have found themselves effectively exiled from the party. This has created an environment where it's politically dangerous for Republicans to acknowledge even the possibility that Trump might have done something wrong, regardless of what the evidence shows. The implications for American democracy are profound. When one of the two major political parties refuses to accept the legitimacy of prosecuting its leader, regardless of the evidence, it undermines the rule of law itself. It suggests that justice is purely political, that there's no such thing as an impartial legal system, only power struggles between partisan factions. This cynicism is corrosive to democratic institutions and creates a permission structure for future politicians to ignore legal constraints, knowing their party will defend them regardless of their actions. At the same time, Trump's supporters raise uncomfortable questions that deserve serious consideration. Is it coincidence that all these prosecutions emerged as Trump was mounting another presidential campaign? While the timing can be explained by the pace of investigations and the legal process, it's undeniable that these cases are having an enormous impact on the 2024 election. Should prosecutors consider the political implications of their decisions? Most would say no, that justice should be blind to politics. But when prosecutorial decisions inevitably affect elections, can we really separate the two? There's also the question of selective prosecution. Trump's defenders point out that other politicians have arguably committed similar offenses without facing criminal charges. They note that Hillary Clinton faced no charges for her handling of classified emails, that various politicians have used campaign funds inappropriately without prosecution, and that many public officials have made false statements without being indicted for it. Are the cases against Trump really about equal justice, or are they about who you are and what you represent politically? These questions don't have easy answers, but they matter enormously for how Americans perceive their justice system. The international implications of Trump's legal battles are also worth considering. America has long positioned itself as a beacon of democracy and the rule of law, often criticizing other countries for politically motivated prosecutions. Now the world is watching as America prosecutes a former president and current presidential candidate. Some see this as proof that American institutions are strong enough to hold even the most powerful accountable. Others see it as evidence of American political dysfunction and hypocrisy. Authoritarian leaders around the world have seized on Trump's prosecutions as evidence that America is no different from any other country where political opponents use the legal system against each other. Looking ahead to the potential scenarios, the political consequences become even more unpredictable. What happens if Trump wins the presidency while under indictment or even after conviction? The Constitution doesn't prohibit a convicted felon from serving as president. There's no mechanism to prevent it. Trump has made clear he believes he has the authority to pardon himself for federal crimes, a claim that has never been tested in court. Would he fire special counsel Jack Smith on day one? Would he order the Justice Department to drop all federal cases against him? These aren't hypothetical questions anymore. They're real possibilities that could fundamentally alter the relationship between the presidency and the law. Conversely, what happens if Trump loses the 2024 election? Does he face prison time? Can you imprison a 78-year-old former president without creating a political martyr? Would state authorities in Georgia or New York really put him behind bars, knowing it could trigger unrest among his most devoted followers? And what would conviction mean for Trump's continued influence over the Republican Party? Would he finally fade from the political scene, or would he become an even more powerful symbol of resistance against what his supporters see as a corrupt establishment? The legal battles have also transformed Trump's relationship with his supporters in profound ways. He's no longer just a political figure. He's become a symbol of resistance against what many conservatives see as a weaponized government apparatus. Every indictment, every trial, every conviction is framed as an attack not just on Trump, but on everyone who voted for him. This has created an almost religious devotion among some supporters who see Trump as a martyr suffering persecution for daring to challenge the powerful. This psychological dynamic makes his supporters more committed, more willing to donate money, more likely to turn out to vote. In a perverse way, Trump's legal troubles have become his greatest political asset among his base. The media's role in all of this cannot be ignored. Every court appearance, every filing, every development in these cases generates massive coverage. Trump has always understood media dynamics better than perhaps any politician of his generation. He knows that controversy generates attention, and attention generates support among people who feel ignored by mainstream institutions. The constant coverage of his legal battles keeps him at the center of the political conversation, drowning out other Republican voices and forcing even his critics to focus on him. Love him or hate him, you can't ignore him, and in politics, attention is currency. As we watch these legal and political dramas continue to unfold, we're witnessing something unprecedented in American history. The ultimate resolution of Trump's legal battles will help define what kind of country America becomes. Will it be a country where no one, not even a former president, is above the law? Or will it be a country where political power provides immunity from accountability? Will these prosecutions strengthen democratic institutions by showing they can hold the powerful accountable? Or will they weaken those institutions by appearing partisan and selective? The answers to these questions will reverberate through American politics for decades to come. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, whatever you believe about his guilt or innocence, the legal and political battles surrounding him represent a turning point in American democracy. We're in uncharted waters, navigating questions that the founders never imagined and that our legal and political systems are struggling to address. The consequences of how we navigate this moment will shape not just the 2024 election, but the fundamental nature of American democracy for generations to come. History is being written in courtrooms and campaign rallies across America, and we're all witnesses to a transformation whose final chapter has yet to be written.